Barbara Wilson is the author of The Invisible Bond and former director of sexual health education for the Alternatives Pregnancy Resource Center in Sacramento, California. She speaks to youth and adults with her message of sexual healing. Barbara, welcome back. We had you here with The Invisible Bond.
Yes, thank you.
And just the words I have spoken are not heard frequently on this program. This is not a subject that we would be talking about on a typical day.
That's true.
But it's an important one.
It absolutely is. You know, we've had a little over 40 years since the sexual revolution began back in the early 60s. And at the time we weren't really so concerned about, we were more concerned about like getting an STD or getting pregnant. But after 40 plus years of the promiscuity and multiple partners, we're now beginning to see the impact of this on our relationships, especially in marriage. And so these invisible bonds that we create outside of marriage come into our marriage and begin to impact our emotional and physical intimacy.
Now, invisible bonds. For those who don't know what we're talking about yet, tell us what that is.
Well, you know, when God said in the Bible, you know, we become one flesh, he was talking not only about the physical, but also a spiritual and emotional bonding that happens. But cutting research has just discovered this amazing hormone that you talked about earlier, the hormone of love, oxytocin, that scientists have discovered creates a bond, a relational bond with one another. And so when we experience, you know, this intimate relationship inside marriage, it creates this chemical bond as well that allows us to have a stronger and stronger bond.
It's interesting, a couple very dear to me, mutually consented. They decided to divorce. And both were very surprised at the emotional tearing that they experienced in divorcing. This attests to that bond, that spiritual connection. And this, in fact, adultery is the only grounds that Jesus gives for he says that breaks the marriage bond.
Right, it does break the bond, but we still stay attached to that person, and that's where, you know, God says he creates that oneness and only he can sever that bond too. And so part of the healing process is allowing him to sever those bonds that we've created outside of marriage so that we can have the kind of bond that he designed for us in marriage. And this is what I see happening in the ministry that I lead for leading women through sexual healing, is as God heals the bonds that they've created outside marriage, whether it's from, let's say, abuse or rape or their own choices, and then as they heal, they're able then to even release oxytocin again and be able to rebond in their marriage.
So part of the lack of passion that some may be experiencing in their marriage could be tied to past history.
Yes, it
that
can.
Just hasn't been dealt with.
Right, and that's what I bring that out more specifically in this book. In the first part of the book, I talk more specifically how sex from the past can impact physical and emotional intimacy in your marriage. And so when you've had a negative association with sex outside marriage, let's say with abuse or rape, you bring those negative associations with you inside marriage. And not only that, you're impacting your ability, you can actually inhibit your ability to release oxytocin to be able to create that kind of strong bond that you want. But also there's other things that can impact your ability because of the past inside marriage to have the kind of closeness emotionally. You know, for women, the physical intimacy is really about how close and safe we feel in that relationship, and that's when we're able to really give ourselves physically in our marriages.
You need emotional intimacy.
Right, for
that's
women.
Foundational for women.
And if we've been hurt in the past or wounded or used, or let's say we've had a lot of breakups involving physical intimacy in our past, and so now we have this negative association with, you know, sex in general, and we bring all of that into our marriage, and that can inhibit us from seeing this relationship the way God designed it to be. And so sometimes we bring all that past and we bring it into our marriage and we kind of impose that on our husbands, say, you know, let's say, you know, like, you're like all the other guys, you know, that used me and abused me, and so we don't see them the way God designed them to be in our marriage.
And this is often an unconscious thing.
Absolutely. That's why I called the first book The Invisible Bond, because we don't know. And that's the thing about the sexual revolution, is we're just looking at the outside consequences of that. You know, pregnancy, or babies out of marriage or STDs, but there's this invisible consequence that we're bringing into our marriage that's impacting our ability to have the kind of bond and relationship God really designed for us. If you save sex for that one person and you get married, now you're, then in marriage they're the only person that you're creating this bond with, and that oxytocin is being released and your bond gets stronger and stronger and stronger. That's why the studies show that married couples have the best sex, especially ones that have been married longer. But when you've had lots of sex in the past, then you're going to inhibit that ability to create that strong bond.
If only people would believe that God knows what He's doing, that when He says don't, it's for our good.
Exactly.
Very interesting. According to a national campaign to prevent teen pregnancy, 55% of sexually active boys and 72% of sexually active girls under 20 wish they had waited to have sex.
Right.
This isn't down the road when their marriage is in trouble.
Right.
This is already, they're saying, why did I do that?
Well, because culture says it's no big deal. Sex is no big deal, right? And you can just move on to the next partner. But the thing is, it's kind of like when, Adam and Eve took that first bite out of the apple. What happened? Their eyes were open. And I think the same thing happens with sex. We think it's no big deal, and then we experience and it's something. Our eyes are open, and we realize this is really something special. We have given away something that we can never give away again. And there's this huge sense of regret. And we bring that into our marriage too. A lot of guilt and shame and regret, and we live with that shame, and that keeps us from just being, just having the kind of relationship that God wants for us.
Now sexual health is your passion.
Well, yes, and now sexual healing, but both of those things.
Health and healing. A survey of 1,000 women found that 84% of women have sex with their husbands to keep the peace. Another survey found that many women would rather clean the oven.
Isn't that sad?
I think we have a problem.
Yeah.
Now, do you have any idea how much of that might be tied to unhealed history?
Well, in what I do, I see a lot of that has to do with, sex from the past and how it's impacting their desire for sex, but also even their ability to feel love or to feel that emotional closeness with their spouse. And for women, there's lots of reasons why we might struggle, with having desire. There's, physical changes and children and all kinds of things. But what I discover is if you take a couple who, let's say, didn't have sex before marriage and compare them with a couple that did have sex before marriage, the ones that did have sex before marriage have a great deal more challenges than those that didn't. And their desire and their love for each other is greatly more impacted than those that didn't have sex before marriage. Now,
you've been married to your husband, Eric,
for 28 years this year.
You have 4 children.
Yes, and 1 grandbaby, so we're enjoying that.
It's wonderful, Barbara. Is this a journey you've had to take yourself?
Yes, it is. And God, He uses whatever He does in our lives for others, of course. And that was my experience, because at the time I was out teaching sexual abstinence to young people and saying, this is why you need to save sex for marriage. But at the time I was beginning to learn about the brain and all this bonding. And it was so amazing, because here I'm out teaching other people, and God began to say, Barb, this is about you too, this is what happened to you. All those sexual choices you made in your past are impacting your desire in marriage and your intimacy with your husband. And so He began to lead me through my own healing journey and began to show me the wounds that I'd accumulated, the lies that I'd ingrained because of my past, and how I was bringing those into my marriage. And they were impacting, first of all, the emotional intimacy with my husband, which then impacted the physical intimacy. And what was so amazing is that as God took me through healing and showed me all of those things and showed me the wounding that I'd had and severed those bonds that I'd created, our physical intimacy not only improved, but our emotional intimacy. And God's just done this amazing healing in our own marriage, in our own lives. And so now I see Him doing it in other people's lives, and it's so awesome.